Grant had always taken pride in his precise approach to troubleshooting, a skill sharpened during his time as an independent mechanic and former technician aboard a now-retired planetary defense fleet. He was no stranger to electrical systems and circuit design. Still, none of that expertise could have readied him for what awaited on a blistering frontier world, where a statuesque, violet-skinned alien crouched beside his young daughter. He had landed his aging rover on the arid planet just hours earlier, hoping to scavenge components to keep his aging vehicle operational. Instead, he came across what appeared to be a streamlined spacefaring vessel stranded in the dunes, one of its thrusters partially ripped from its housing. His daughter, AA, toddled around in the dust, clutching an energy core and innocently trying to wedge it into the earth. She was completely unaware that the tall alien woman kneeling beside her belonged to a rarely seen species from the galaxy's central systems. Bathed in the amber glow of twilight, the alien's elegant figure shimmered beneath a finely detailed bodysuit, crafted from what looked like advanced, tightly woven materials. Behind her, the ship emitted a low hum, pale blue light arcing near its primary propulsion system. One glance at the design told Grant it was a premium model, likely built for someone from an affluent galactic sector. He crouched near the vessel, gripping his trusty conduction spanner, a tool that had rescued him from more breakdowns than he could remember. He'd already pried open a portion of the cruiser's exterior to examine the dense network of internal wiring. While testing connections, he stole a glance at the alien's face. He didn't know her identity, but her articulate manner of speaking hinted at a background shaped by refinement and precision, every word chosen with care. AA tapped the alien's knee, babbling about the gadget in her grasp. The alien responded with a nod that carried both nobility and curiosity. Grant had the impression she wasn't used to interacting with children. Still, she remained composed and engaged, occasionally reaching out with graceful fingers to examine the dusty object in AA's hands. Grant had only offered to fix the ship because it felt like the right thing to do. He'd met her earlier near the grounded craft, pacing with barely contained frustration. She'd explained in calm but urgent tones that debris in orbit had crippled her thruster. Grant had stepped in to assist without asking for compensation or gratitude. It was instinctual. When faced with a technical dilemma, he couldn't resist jumping in. Plus, there had been AA's gentle tug at his sleeve, as if silently encouraging him to help. The desert breeze carried the quiet emptiness so common on lifeless worlds, interrupted only by the occasional clink and hum of Grant's old toolkit. He rummaged for some universal wiring, then poked his head into an access panel near the ship's lateral vents, revealing the primary control matrix. He let out a low whistle. Rows of miniature, high-spec microchips lined the panel, far beyond anything he'd worked with in this backwater sector. "I can't guarantee a flawless repair," he murmured, "but if you just need the thruster resecured and your nav system stabilized, I can jury-rig a few bypasses. I'll run diagnostics before you try to lift off." The alien locked eyes with him, her lavender irises shining with guarded skepticism. "Your methods are unconventional," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "However, if you succeed in restoring partial capability, I will owe you." With that, Grant got to work. He swapped out a damaged bundle of fiber optic lines with spares from his own vehicle, improvising an interface to trick the onboard AI into accepting the replacements. Nearby, AA rolled a small orb-shaped component through the sand, squealing whenever it flickered with light. The alien watched the child with a mixture of wonder and unfamiliarity, as if trying to comprehend an alien tradition. While reconnecting wires around the main console, Grant noticed an emblem engraved onto part of the hull, a symbol made of elegant curves, resembling a noble crest. He didn't recognize it from any known merchant fleet or military division. Unbeknownst to him, the ship's pilot was far more than a mere voyager. She had offered no clues to her rank or history, barely shared anything about herself. Whenever Grant probed for more, she dodged his questions or simply diverted her gaze. As dusk deepened into night, Grant set up portable lights. AA applauded each time a beam flared to life. Their unusual guest, who had introduced herself only as Era, remained watchful but intrigued. She observed the bond between father and daughter intently. At one point, AA shyly offered her a piece of dried fruit. Ira hesitated, Analyzing the gesture, then gave a small bow of thanks and took a cautious bite, offering a subtle nod in appreciation. Grant resumed his work, navigating the maze of scorched wires behind the console. Many had been badly burned. It looked like the ship had endured a skirmish or even a direct attack. He didn't ask. Out here, people kept their pasts buried. Instead, he relied on what he could observe. Burn marks on the hull, telltale signs of energy weapons, and a pilot's seat reinforced like those used by elite diplomats or high-ranking officers expecting sabotage. Yet she traveled alone. No entourage. No official markings besides that enigmatic crest. It only deepened his curiosity. What kind of person with such resources would wander into this forgotten corner of the galaxy without protection? Era offered no answers. She simply watched him piece her ship back together, occasionally producing high-end components from concealed panels and handing them over with practiced ease, evidence of someone far more skilled and experienced than she let on. Though she allowed him to take the lead, perhaps Era was unfamiliar with local resources or skeptical of frontier expertise. Or maybe she simply acknowledged that Grant possessed the mechanical intuition to work with unconventional systems. Meanwhile, Ava turned the scene into playtime, collecting tiny screws and cheerfully passing them to her father. "Got one," she chirped, dropping a small bit of metal into Grant's calloused hand. He offered her a faint smile, inspected the piece for size, then turned toward Ira, muttering, "Your thruster mount should hold if we secure these just beneath the main brace." She stepped in, nodding as she examined the point of reattachment. Their positions around the damaged spacecraft would later crystallize as a memory that captured the essence of that strange day. Grant crouched with his spanner, Ava nestled in the sand, and Era bending low to study the exposed structure, her hair catching the light of distant stars. A soft glow from the open hatch illuminated the unlikely trio. To an outsider, the moment might have looked like a surreal family tableau, but it was simply an unforeseen convergence, sparked by a mechanical failure. The final adjustment to the thruster took hours. Grant meticulously rewired dozens of severed lines and fine-tuned the propulsion system so that the ship's computer could recognize the new sensor inputs. While he labored, Ira observed him with silent intensity. Every time frustration crept in, when he ran into obscure subcircuits or unstable connections, he'd sigh, dig through his tools, and grumble about inconsistent firmware updates. She appeared mildly amused by his commentary. At one point, he mumbled, "Let me guess, high-end galactic elegance meets frontier improvisation. Might be the strangest patch job I've ever done." Ava eventually grew weary and broke into tired tears. Grant immediately halted his work, scooped her up, and gently rocked her to sleep, softly humming a tune from his old cargo freighter days. That tender side of fatherhood seemed to puzzle Era. She watched quietly from a few paces away, casting glances between the drowsy child and the half-restored thruster, but never speaking. By the time dawn tinged the horizon with muted gold, the ship's systems emitted a confirmation tone. Grant triggered a low-power ignition on the repaired thruster. A faint blue pulse emerged. He cut the power, satisfied that the baseline functions were online. Next step, integrate the flight console and check for any system-wide failsafes. Limping slightly, he climbed into the cramped cockpit with Ava still sleeping on his shoulder. Ira followed, her posture rigid. Within moments, Grant noticed another layer of sophisticated control tech. "You sure you're just passing through?" he asked, eyeing the interface. "This thing's got more firewalls than anything I've seen outside a Royal Defense cruiser." She turned her gaze away. "I've lived a complicated life. The burns on the hull, those weren't random. My family's position draws attention. I've learned not to take chances." He wasn't the type to push. He let the subject drop and hooked a diagnostic module into the ship's main console to verify thruster data. The readings were promising. Starboard propulsion had stabilized, the hull breach was sealed, and both fuel and life support were running at 71% capacity. Not perfect, but more than enough for near-space flight. Era let out a soft exhale, her shoulders finally relaxing. Then the console pinged. A new signal had arrived. Her entire body tensed. She stepped forward, swiftly scanning the transmission. Her long fingers danced over the interface, filtering encrypted bursts of audio. They sounded rushed, possibly desperate. She closed the channel and sighed with quiet frustration. My route's been compromised, she said, her voice caught between gratitude and concern. There may be hostile ships on their way. I have to leave soon. Grant had dealt with pirates and mercenary gangs in the outer sectors, but her expression suggested this was no ordinary threat. He felt a creeping sense of unease, but kept his questions to himself. Instead, he reviewed the data calmly. Based on your current thrust readings, he said, you can escape orbit if you keep engine stress low. Follow the auto-navigation arc to bypass the gravity swell. I assume you've got a hyperdrive for the next leg? She nodded, though her eyes betrayed lingering fear. With all systems checked, they returned to the surface. The morning light had turned the sky into a shimmering haze. That's when an unexpected sight unfolded on the horizon. Several dark, streamlined vehicles breaching the ridge of the dunes, moving in formation. They weren't a wandering caravan. Their formation was too coordinated. Grant recognized it immediately, likely a private militia, maybe a hired strike team. Era's expression hardened. She reached into a concealed panel along the hull, withdrawing a sleek weapon that extended with a soft mechanical hiss. She met Grant's gaze squarely. "They've found me." He blinked, shifting A's weight in his arms. "We need to move," he said. "My rover's parked about half a kilometer out, but it won't be much help if those people are armed to the teeth." She scanned the landscape carefully. "I can hold them off once the thruster's fully operational, but I still need a few more minutes to finish the calibration sequence." He calculated the risk. If those mercenaries came any closer, they'd be within firing distance, and likely blast the ship apart. He had a small pistol stowed in his bag, but it wasn't enough to take on a full strike team. Still, he refused to let them trap a child who had already lost her mother. He gently placed AA in the shade behind a supply crate. "Stay here," he told his sleepy daughter, keeping his voice steady. He handed her an old comm device, the blinking lights meant to distract her. Era raised her sleek weapon toward the advancing silhouettes, eyes narrowing. The first round of gunfire tore through the air with a sharp snap. Sand erupted in quick, sharp bursts. "They're testing our defenses," she muttered. Grant pulled out his modest firearm. "I'll draw their attention from the ridge. Fire up the thruster. If you get airborne, I'll figure something out." He wasn't entirely joking, but he also didn't want her leaving him behind. There was no good escape plan that included all three of them. She frowned. "You won't stand a chance out there. You've done enough. Take your daughter and go. I'll hold them off." He shook his head, adrenaline kicking in. "I'm not abandoning you, and there's nowhere safe for me and AA anyway." A second barrage slammed into the sand nearby. The ship's systems whined in protest. He cursed and sprinted to a spot behind a half-buried rock. Shots hissed past as he returned fire from cover, sending weak energy blasts toward the lead vehicle. His weapon barely scratched their armor. Meanwhile, Era fired with precision. Her focused beam struck a front tire, sending the vehicle spinning into another in a crunch of metal and sand. The ones behind swerved to avoid the wreckage. "Get that thruster ready!" Grant shouted. "I'll keep their heads down." He peppered the dunes with more fire, not expecting to stop them, but hoping to slow their advance. A few seconds could make all the difference. Era dashed back to the ship, dove into the cockpit, and began the startup. The engines groaned, releasing a wave of hot air that kicked up a swirling dust cloud. AA sneezed, startled, then hugged the crate tightly, eyes wide. Grant fired until his weapon was nearly drained. The attackers responded with heavier guns. Explosions churned the desert floor, flinging debris everywhere. Some shots slammed into the ship, but the reinforced plating held. Through the chaos, Era's voice echoed through the ship's external speaker. "Primary thruster is online. I need 30 more seconds." Grant wiped sweat from his brow. He knew how quickly this could end, but he wasn't backing down. He dashed over to AA, who was trembling but quiet. He scooped her up and made a run for the loading ramp beneath the cruiser. If the ship took off, he was going to be inside it. A sudden blast rocked the ground behind him. He staggered, shielding AA with his body as a wave of heat hit. Coughing, he pushed forward, step by step. He spotted the partially open ramp, leapt onto it, and slapped the control panel to close the hatch. The moment the doors sealed, the whole vessel shuddered. The thrusters hummed loudly. More blasts echoed outside, but then the ship lifted, straining upward. AA whimpered and buried her face in his neck. "We're okay," he whispered, though he wasn't sure. Up front, Era was locked in a tense battle with the flight controls. Displays flickered as she adjusted. She let out a relieved cry when they climbed higher, the vehicles now specks below. A few final shots fizzled out against the shielding. With a surge, the cruiser rose into the upper atmosphere and leveled off. She exhaled deeply, brushing sweat from her forehead. Grant eased into the co-pilot's chair, settling AA in his lap. "That's not just a family quarrel you're running from." Her jaw tightened. "No, it's not. There's a full-blown political upheaval in my region. My role makes me a high-value target." She paused. "They probably traced me here because of what I'm carrying. I never meant to involve you. Or your daughter." Grant offered a wry smile. "Out here, I've met more than my share of difficult strangers, but this is the first time I've hijacked my own getaway ship after fixing it." She glanced at the diagnostics. "Your rewiring's holding up, but we need to jump soon." She directed the cruiser toward low orbit. The desert receded into a sea of dunes below. The autopilot pinged, a signal that the hyperdrive was spooling up. But the readout wasn't good. It wasn't at full capacity. Maybe the earlier damage ran deeper than they thought. She started modifying the system parameters, biting her lip in concentration. Grant studied her expression. "Show me the hyperdrive couplings. I might be able to help. Did the Mercs damage them, or was it from earlier?" She hesitated, then answered quietly. "I think it was from an ambush at a spaceport a few cycles ago." A few days ago, the couplings had already been malfunctioning even before she landed, but she had taken a chance. Grant turned to Ava. "Stay in this seat," he said, before trailing Alara into the narrow corridor behind the cockpit. They entered a cramped maintenance bay lined with flickering control panels. Grant quickly identified the hyperdrive's resonance chamber, encircled by thick power conduits. Alara pulled one panel open, revealing burnt-out fuses and a cluster of scorched circuits. The warp coil wouldn't function properly if the couplings remained misaligned. Grant dug through his utility belt. "I've got a universal fuse replacement, but it might not withstand full voltage. Let's try rerouting auxiliary power so we don't overload the connections." As he got to work, her tense body language betrayed her anxiety. She paced the corridor, occasionally glancing up at a display streaming incoming signals, likely encrypted messages or warnings from whoever was chasing her. Finally, she murmured, "My name is Alara Novath. I belong to a ruling dynasty in the core systems." "That explains the elite ship," Grant muttered. She continued, "That means intercorporate alliances, immense wealth, and political intrigue. My presence in the Outer Rim isn't a coincidence. I've been fleeing repeated assassination attempts." Grant paused mid-repair. "So all this time I thought you were just some tech-savvy drifter with expensive taste in spacecraft. Never guessed you were tied to a whole empire." "You never asked," she said with a faint smile. "Truthfully, the fewer people who know, the better. But I owe you honesty, especially now that we're sharing orbital space." He nodded and connected the last conduit. The hyperdrive spool began to hum, power levels climbing and stabilizing at 92%. "Should be enough for a short-range jump," he said, gesturing toward the cockpit. "Give it a try." She rushed forward. A moment later, the system chimed, "Success." Grant stepped in behind her, scanning the data. "Looks like we're cleared to make the jump. Where to?" Her expression turned grim. "I was heading to an unclaimed zone near the Bard system, but it may be compromised. Those Mercs could have set up a blockade. The safer bet might be a formal trade corridor, but that means going through regulated ports crawling with agents loyal to my enemies." Meanwhile, Ava sat in the co-pilot chair, curiously poking at a glowing console. She tapped a button, triggering a sharp error beep that startled them both. Grant leaned over and gently disabled the panel, letting out a dry chuckle. "Let's handle one emergency at a time, kiddo." After a quick deliberation, they chose to set a course for a neutral sector rumored to be watched by a more moderate alliance. Once the navigation synced, the ship bent the surrounding space and leapt forward in a sudden, brilliant flash. Ava squealed with surprise, hugging the seat as the stars stretched into streaks, then snapped back as they exited hyperspace. That's when Grant noticed a series of unread messages on Alara's personal comms. She hesitated before opening them, her face paling as she read the latest entry aloud in a hushed voice. My father, he's been taken. They're using him as leverage. Grant's shoulders slumped. I'm sorry. She straightened, trying to stay composed, though the tightness around her eyes betrayed her stress. We'll have to tread carefully. He leads our home system, or did. I can't challenge the conspirators with a damaged ship. I'll need allies, or at least a safer route to reach him. Grant nodded slowly. My old unit once worked with a group of independent ex-military operatives near the Outer Rim. If they're still around, they might help, assuming we can trade them something they need. If you really have the influence you say you do, you could strike a deal. You'd come with me? She asked, raising an eyebrow. This isn't your war. You've got a daughter to protect. He glanced at the sleeping child in his arms. It's not like we can just disappear now. Besides, I helped patch up your ship. Might as well see this mission through. And something tells me those mercs aren't done chasing us either. She considered his words, then gave a nod. I appreciate your loyalty, but you should know, this may escalate into a full-blown conflict if my adversaries gain the upper hand. Grant gave a humorless chuckle. Then we'll need a better plan. I'll worry about it tomorrow. They initiated a second jump, aiming for an obscure outpost. The next few hours felt surreal to Grant. That morning, he'd been stranded on a remote desert planet. Now, he was hurtling through the stars aboard a noblewoman's starship, caught in a web of galactic politics. Still, with every passing moment, his sense of purpose grew. Running away no longer felt like an option. They emerged into orbit around a broken planet surrounded by rings of debris. On the far side, a small station loomed, bristling with sensor dishes. Alara engaged stealth mode, and with the engines at low power, they approached the docking bay unnoticed. Auxiliary pylon. The area appeared abandoned, save for a few weather-worn ships docked around the perimeter. Grant searched through the vessel's supply locker for a tire that might help them blend into the surroundings. Meanwhile, Ava grew fussy, complaining that she was hungry. With a faintly apologetic look, Ira retrieved some vacuum-sealed rations from a nearby compartment. The child accepted them without enthusiasm, then turned to her father. Grant cobbled together a makeshift meal from his emergency rations, far from gourmet but sufficient. AA watched their interaction, her curious gaze betraying quiet interest. They disembarked, stepping into the station's dim corridors where flickering lights cast a weak, intermittent glow. The air was musty but breathable. Walls were plastered with posters advertising local auctions and clandestine trades. After a cautious trek, they reached a security post manned by a lethargic attendant in a tattered uniform. Alara presented a counterfeit ID, which the guard barely glanced at, too apathetic to verify it. Grant handed over a small bribe to smooth their entry. Ava, still clinging to his leg, pointed at a colorful swirl of graffiti and babbled about how it reminded her of the thruster's light. Ira offered a half smile at the girl's observation. In a secluded alcove near a broken cargo lift, Grant accessed an underground comms network. He input old frequencies from his time with the defense fleet. Eventually, a reply came through from a contact named Bastion, someone he hadn't heard from in years. Bastion's tone was guarded. I don't run charity missions anymore. State your business. Grant kept his voice low. I've got a high-value client willing to fund a mission. It involves rescuing her father from captivity. Interested? The line crackled with static. Then Bastion replied, maybe, for the right fee. Send your coordinates. Grant ended the call, unsettled. If Bastion had been compromised, they could be walking into a trap, but there were no better leads. He turned to Alara. He might not be trustworthy, but he has the means. If you want your father freed, this might be our only option. She nodded, hiding any hint of unease. Let's move forward. They returned to the ship with only essential gear. Bastion's coordinates led them to a grimy docking area on the station's far side. After weaving through maze-like corridors, they reached a wide hallway filled with shipping crates. Bastion, a stocky man with a trimmed beard, leaned against a metal container. He looked Grant over, eyes pausing briefly on AA in confusion, then shifting to Alara with a flicker of recognition at her noble posture. Grant grinned sideways. Bastion, let's talk somewhere private. Inside a compact break room, Alara explained the situation. Her father's imprisonment, the rising political unrest, and the rogue families funding mercenaries across the Outer Rim. Bastion listened silently, arms folded, occasionally glancing at her ornate bodysuit. Eventually, he said, "I can see a path for infiltration. My team specializes in covert extractions, but we'll need substantial compensation." She raised a brow. "Name your price." When he did, Grant almost choked. It was a staggering sum by frontier standards. Still, to someone of her status, it may have been trivial. Alara gave a subtle nod. "Agreed, but I want a precise strategy. No reckless moves that endanger civilians." Bastion entered a command into his comm device, mobilizing his crew. "We'll retrieve your father, but if you betray me, we both lose." "Understood," she said. They finalized the agreement. The plan: travel to a region near her family's capital world. Bastion's unit would infiltrate the detention center, disable its defenses, and extract her father. He'd be delivered to a safe house. Simultaneously, Alara would broadcast a secure transmission, threatening her enemies with financial ruin if they refused to back down. Despite the plan's clarity, Grant felt a growing tension. Bastion's squad moved with the restless energy of men expecting trouble. Their glances toward Alara were curious, even skeptical. She bore it all with calm poise, refusing to show doubt. They parted ways, agreeing to reconvene in orbit around the capital system in 2 days. That evening, inside the cruiser's modest cabin, Grant tried to comfort AA. The low hum of the station seemed to agitate her. He spun silly tales about mechanical creatures that squeaked and clanked. She eventually drifted off to sleep. Alara stood nearby, silently watching the stars beyond the viewport. She waited quietly in the corridor until the child finally fell asleep, then whispered, "Thank you for staying. This was never part of your plan. Are you sure it's worth the danger?" He examined her face, noticing the faint gleam in her eyes. "You needed assistance. I provided it. Now we're in this together. Besides, I can't just walk away. I'd be constantly looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life." She glanced out the nearby window, showing the station's exterior. "You have a point." The following day, they departed the station and rendezvoused with Bastion's ship in open space. The jump transported them to the edge of her home system, a heavily monitored zone swarming with security drones. Bastion guided them along a route that skirted official patrols. Soon, they arrived at a remote moon used as a staging ground, hidden within a secluded canyon. Bastion's specialists prepared their stealth equipment, while Grant assisted with last-minute adjustments to the infiltration gadgets. Meanwhile, Alara reviewed intelligence on her father's whereabouts. He was held in a fortress near the seat of their family's government, surrounded by high walls, advanced turrets, and automated sentinel droids. They suspected that members of the council who opposed her father orchestrated the captivity to force him into relinquishing control over the territory's valuable resource exports. The next few hours unfolded in a tense flurry of activity. The infiltration team launched at dusk, deploying decoys that scrambled the fortress's scanning systems. Meanwhile, Grant hovered in readiness aboard the princess's ship, prepared to execute a swift extraction if necessary. AA sat behind him, fiddling with a small plush device, occasionally asking if they were playing a game, a question he found hard to answer. Shortly after, the team reported reaching the fortress perimeter. Quiet pops echoed as alarm systems were disabled. Another hushed message relayed a near confrontation with a sentinel droid, which they managed to overcome. Finally, a coded ping confirmed they had reached her father's cell. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. Then, abruptly, the fortress lights flared and heavy blasts echoed through the rocky canyon. Something had gone wrong. Bastion's team shouted frantic updates about a locked-down corridor and a barrage of turret fire pinning them in place. Desperation colored their voices. Alara clenched her fists. "I have to go." She left the cockpit, grabbed her weapon, and strode toward the exit ramp. Grant called after her, "Wait! You'll be outgunned!" She spun around, eyes blazing. "That's my father in there, and I promised him a clean extraction. If everything collapses, any chance for future stability will too. I have to act." He hesitated only for a moment before unbuckling AA from her seat, carrying her in one arm as he followed. "Fine, but we do this smart. Let me try jamming the turret targeting. At least that gives us a fighting chance." They hurried onto the moon's barren surface, illuminated by the fortress floodlights in the distance. Bastion's men had left a shuttle parked behind a ridge. Grant sprinted there with AA while she climbed into the pilot's seat. The shuttle was a partial infiltration craft equipped with advanced jamming modules. She fired up the engines with a metallic whine as Grant strapped AA into a seat, holding her tightly. The shuttle soared low over the ground, weaving between craters and dodging boulders. The fortress loomed ahead, turrets pivoting ominously overhead, sizzling beams slicing the air. The shuttle jolted as fragments of rock pelted its underside. Alara aimed for a narrow maintenance bay near the fortress's eastern tower, forcing the craft down with a harsh scrape. Grant unlatched the hatch, scanning the corridor beyond. It was deserted, presumably because the guards were focused on the main infiltration site. Good for them. They proceeded cautiously through a half-destroyed corridor marked with scorch marks, evidence that Bastion's men had passed this way. They found a side room where sentinel droids lay twisted in piles. A brief flicker of lights revealed smoke drifting upward. One of Bastion's soldiers, injured and breathing heavily, leaned against the wall and rasped, "They took your father to a panic chamber deeper inside. We've lost 4 men." Bastion crouched near the central passage. Alara nodded sharply. "Stay here. We'll handle it." Grant improvised a jamming sequence using the shuttle's handheld device, typing rapidly as he integrated it into the fortress's local network. Grant tried to feed false data into the turret system through the network, hoping to disrupt its targeting logic and buy them enough time to retrieve her father. They proceeded cautiously down a twisting corridor until they arrived at a sealed blast door. Bastion's muffled commands came from the opposite side. Examining a nearby control panel, Grant discovered it was secured by advanced encryption. He produced a compact hacking device and connected it to the door's interface. The device beeped as he inputted commands, exhaling sharply each time an error routine interrupted his progress. Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind them. 2 guards in uniform appeared, rifles in hand. Spotting Grant's group in the hallway, they immediately raised their weapons and shouted orders to drop everything. Ava gasped, clutching her father tightly. Alara reacted swiftly, diving behind a structural pillar and firing her slim weapon. One guard staggered as the beam grazed his shoulder. The second guard retaliated with a burst of shots that whizzed overhead. Grant ducked and returned fire with his pistol, pinning the guard behind a partially collapsed panel as they exchanged gunfire. Meanwhile, the hacking kit signaled success. The blast door began to rumble open. Grant yelled to Bastion, "Move, move." Bastion's team surged forward, tossing a sonic disruptor toward the guards. The device exploded with a sizzling pop, sending one guard collapsing and dropping his rifle. The corridor fell eerily silent except for the crackling of damaged wiring. Alara sprinted ahead, scanning the dimness. "Is my father safe?" she asked urgently. Bastion nodded grimly. "We found him, but we can't get close. Additional turrets guard the corridor to that panic chamber. Anyone who approaches will be shredded." Grant stepped forward. "I have the jamming codes for the main turret. Let's try linking them to the smaller turrets too." Bastion directed him to a side console. Grant connected his device and typed rapidly, forging a new subroutine. The fortress's automated defenses flickered uncertainly, as if confused. One by one, Bastion's men advanced down the hallway, disabling the last security drones. They finally reached the panic chamber. Inside was an elderly man wearing ornate robes now stained by captivity. Though worn and battered, he still held a resilient spirit. Alara pressed a control, and the door hissed open, revealing her father's exhausted face. She stepped inside gently, bowing briefly. He managed a tired smile. Bastion's team secured the path and escorted the group back to the infiltration shuttle. The older man tried to stand tall, but wariness weighed heavily on him. He glanced at Grant, then at Ava, then at the rugged crew, piecing it all together. With alarms still blaring, they boarded the shuttle and blasted off toward Alara's ship. They transferred her father carefully and hooked him up to medical equipment. She instructed Bastion to sabotage the fortress leadership, crippling their internal systems. Then, she sent an encrypted transmission to the capital city, declaring her father freed and the conspirators' stronghold shattered. Her broadcast resonated with council members loyal to the true dynasty. Though some anticipated a major battle, the sudden rescue and sabotage triggered chaos among rival factions. That very day, palace loyalists seized key positions, toppling the conspirators. The conflict's resolution was swift and dramatic. After the dust settled, Alara escorted her father to a secure location. She paid Bastion's crew as agreed, and they withdrew, satisfied. Turning to Grant, she looked nearly uncertain. "You saved my life and my father's. You risked your child in the process, something I deeply regret. There must be a way I can repay you." Cradling Ava, who yawned, he replied honestly, "I only wanted to keep my family safe, fix my ship, and find some stability. But it seems we've ended up with more than we expected." "If your position truly controls the wealth of an entire territory," he added, "maybe you could help me find a place here, not a frontier world, but somewhere my daughter can have a real future." Alara studied him, then exchanged a look with her father. The elder man nodded. She faced Grant. "I promise to provide whatever you need. Education, protection for your child, a chance to pursue your mechanical skills without struggling on desert planets. Our territory could benefit from your resourcefulness." Grant considered, stroking Ava's hair as she drifted to sleep. "I accept, but only if I'm free to choose my own path. If I don't fit in or want to live as a servant, I want to walk away." Alara gave a slight smile. "I wouldn't have it any other way." In that moment, the father realized an unlikely truth. The enormous alien princess kneeling in the desert, the one whose ship he had rewired without knowing her true identity, had changed his life, and in return, he had changed hers. In the days that followed, her father recovered and reconnected with Allied Council members outraged by the conspirators' coup. Official transmissions confirmed the rightful dynasty's cautious restoration of power. Alara's rank was recognized throughout the region, ensuring no mercenary group could easily threaten her again. Meanwhile, Grant took a brief shuttle ride to the Palace Dome, an elegant edifice perched above the planet's azure seas. Inside, advanced technology was everywhere. Service droids zipped along, and translucent panels provided sweeping views of star clusters. The docking bay housed an impressive collection of powerful starships. He strolled down the hallways with AA resting on his arm. She pointed excitedly at the ornate columns, giggling. He had never imagined himself walking across marble floors at the heart of power for a major star system, especially not as the guest of its princess. Alara showed him a modest wing of the palace, serving as a technical workshop. With a mischievous grin, she said, "We have plenty of broken gear that needs your expertise. Interested in putting your rewiring skills to good use?" Grant smirked, lifting AA higher. "If you have half the maze of circuits your starship had, I'll be busy for months." She laughed softly, leading him further inside. Servants observed from afar, unsure how to address this humble human who walked alongside their princess with a small child in tow. Some gave him skeptical looks, others whispered quietly. Yet, Alara never wavered, meeting them with a steady gaze that conveyed her trust. Word of his role had evidently spread, and staff began offering respectful nods. Days turned into weeks as Grant adapted to palace life, often retreating to the workshop to avoid formalities. AA quickly settled in, learning to chase small mechanical creatures that scurried through the corridors. She found delight in pressing random holographic buttons, squeaking whenever something beeped. During this time, Alara managed political negotiations to mend alliances strained by the coup attempt. Her father's health improved, allowing him to resume official duties. Fully aware of Grant's involvement, he expressed sincere gratitude, though his words were measured. "I owe you a personal debt. When I was imprisoned, I feared my daughter would face my enemies alone. It seems you arrived just in time." Grant responded with modesty, "I'm just a mechanic, sir. Lucky to have found a stranded alien on a desert world." The elder man chuckled and let the matter rest. One evening, at a small gathering in a crystal-walled courtyard, Alara made a surprising declaration. She formally recognized Grant as a guest of highest honor. The discreet title granted him freedom of movement under her personal protection. Some attendees raised eyebrows in silent surprise, but no one dared oppose the choice. After all, the richest and most powerful princess in the galaxy could name whomever she wished as a privileged guest. The ceremony ended with a final toast, and the guests dispersed, leaving only a few close confidants. Alara turned to Grant, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Remember that day in the desert when you had no idea who I was?" I can't stop picturing you crouched there, calmly rewiring everything as if it were just another routine task." He laughed, recalling AA's tiny figure playing with a module in the sand while the massive alien knelt beside her. "If you'd told me then that you were a princess with galaxies worth of resources, I probably would have short-circuited every cable from sheer shock." She laughed, a warm sound echoing through the courtyard. "You might find it amusing, but it's important to me that people see me as more than just a figurehead in formal dress. That day, you treated me like anyone else needing help. It was refreshing." He nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe that's how life should be. You see a problem, you fix it. You see a person, you help them. No fuss." Her eyes sparkled. "That attitude, ironically, led you to a completely different life. Are you ready for it?" He lifted AA into his arms as she blinked sleepily. "As long as my kids are happy and safe, I'll figure out the rest. But you can count on me if you ever get cornered by mercenaries again, or if your fancy starships need more rewiring." She smiled, motioning them to walk with her across the courtyard. Decorative fountains shimmered under starlight, and the air carried a faint scent of local flora, a small detail that made Grant realize just how different his dusty old life had been. He wasn't sure how to define his future within these lavish halls, but he felt he truly belonged, perhaps as a friend, an ally, or something else he couldn't yet foresee. For once, a wave of gratitude washed over him, thankful that fate had guided him from a harsh desert to this moment of unexpected belonging. They reached a broad veranda overlooking the planet's gentle ocean. Under the distant star's glow, her father stepped forward, resting a hand on his daughter's shoulder. He regarded Grant quietly, then nodded. "For our entire family, I thank you." Grant gave a modest shrug. "All I did was fix your ship and lend a hand." The older man allowed a small smile. Sometimes the smallest acts change entire dynasties. With a section of wiring, remember that next time, no immediate reply. Instead, he offered a slight bow of respect. That brief exchange solidified the last connection. A lone father from the frontier had now become entwined in a complex saga of political intrigue and interstellar conflict. The galaxy's wealthiest princess was no longer a distant legend, but a tangible presence in his life. When the time came for a more formal closure, Era chose to host an intimate dinner. No cameras, no grandiose speeches, just a quiet gathering of those who had risked everything to restore peace. Bastian even showed up, wearing a muted expression that hinted at his amusement with the lavish surroundings. As the meal concluded, the princess raised her glass in gratitude. Bastian casually remarked that next time she might want to upgrade her thruster shields if she planned to dodge so many bullets. She shot him a teasing glare. In that moment, Grant realized just how far they had come. The former mercenary, the noble alien, the freelance mechanic, and a sleeping toddler. This unlikely mix had forged the success they now shared in easy camaraderie. At the end of the gathering, Bastian departed for his next mission, shaking Grant's hand firmly. "If you ever need backup, you know where to find me," he said, adding with a smirk, "though I imagine you'll be too busy living the palace life." The whole group laughed. In the days that followed, the conspirators were officially tried and removed from power. Her father resumed leadership, ensuring no rogue faction would threaten them again. With the immediate danger lifted, Era took a final step, honoring her father's legacy by declaring the line of succession secure. She declined any formal coronation, preferring to remain a steady presence behind the scenes while her father fully recovered. Grant decided to stay on the planet, at least for the foreseeable future, to give AA the opportunities he never had. He wandered the palace halls, helped oversee starship repairs, and even lent engineering advice for local infrastructure. Over time, he carved out a unique role that balanced his mechanical skills with palace administration. One bright afternoon, with a crisp ocean breeze drifting through the air, the princess invited him to the docking bay. There, he found the same cruiser he had first repaired, now fully restored, the sleek hull gleaming, thruster ports fitted with new plating. She pointed to the thruster assembly. "We made some upgrades based on your notes. Next time, the ship won't be so vulnerable during flight." He laughed. "I can't help feeling nostalgic about that day. I was just a mechanic with a curious daughter kneeling in the sand, and you were an alien facing an impossible problem. If either of us had hesitated, we wouldn't be here now. She nodded. I guess fate had other plans. They stood silently for a moment, looking at the cruiser, both acknowledging the improbable journey that brought them there. AA scampered in circles, chasing a small service drone that beeped in protest. Grant scooped her up and turned to see Era stepping closer, an amused sparkle in her eyes. I think we've both earned some peace, she said. No more last-minute escapes or frantic fights, for now at least. He shrugged. Peace sounds good, but if trouble comes knocking, we'll do what we always do, fix the problem. A soft laugh escaped her. That pretty much sums up our story. And speaking of stories, your daughter will soon be old enough to remember all this. She'll have quite the tale to tell. Grant chuckled. She'll probably think she dreamed it, finding a spaceship in the desert, my dad fixing it, and a giant alien princess helping me build sandcastles. She'll be the only kid at school with a story like that. AA smirked, stepping back toward the ship. If that doesn't get her top marks in storytelling, nothing will. They finished their final walk around the polished craft. Grant tapped the hull, satisfied with the repairs that transformed it from a battered relic into a shining testament of advanced technology. The improbable adventure that began with a few sparks in the desert had culminated here, in a future fully reconciled. The same father who once knelt in the dust with a wrench now roamed the palace corridors freely, with his daughter forging a new life amid wonders he never dreamed of. In that moment, he felt no regrets. The conspiracies had unraveled, the princess's father was safe, and the fragile reign had been secured against all threats. The single father from the frontier and his young daughter had become part of the galaxy's most powerful ruling family. Yet it all seemed like the most natural outcome in the universe. He watched AA reach out to pat the side of the starship, giggling at her reflection in the gleaming metal. The memory of how a random salvage job turned into an epic rescue flickered through his mind. Even after everything, it still felt astonishing, but in the best possible way. Just then, Era tapped a panel near the thruster, revealing a small engraved emblem, the royal crest she always carried. Grant recognized it instantly, the same symbol once scratched into the battered hull, now renewed and shining in crisp detail. She turned to him with a grin. No more bullet holes? And if you ever decide to take this ship for a spin, it's yours to command. He smiled back. Let's be honest, if I pilot this thing, I'll probably check the thrusters 100 times. Don't want a repeat of the desert fiasco. A gentle breeze swept through the docking bay, stirring a sense of closure. The entire saga had reached its resolution. The fortress was liberated, the father safe, the conspirators defeated, the alien princess reclaimed her rightful throne, and the once aimless mechanic found a home. Grant rested a hand gently on AA's back as she looked up at him, content and secure. Then he glanced at Era, who seemed to be waiting for him to speak. Clearing his throat, he said, I think I owe you thanks for letting me and my girl stay, for giving us a chance to see a bigger world, but most of all for trusting me when I was just tinkering with your cables in the sand. She inclined her regal head. I believe you repaid that by saving my entire family, so maybe we're even. He nodded, lips curving into a half smile. Then let's settle this properly. Next time, dinner's on me, or whatever counts as dinner around here. Maybe we can set aside the drama for one day and just enjoy some peace. Her eyes sparkled. I'd like that. And with that final note, all the threads came together. The father's accidental venture into an alien ship, the child's innocent curiosity, and the princess's hidden identity. They had ended a conspiracy, rescued a ruler, and forged an unexpected bond. Their future stretched ahead with the promise of a fresh start, free from immediate threats or malfunctioning thrusters. For the first time in ages, Grant was certain no one was running from danger, no crises awaited on the horizon. This was the closing chapter, the definitive end to a tale that began in swirling desert sands. Through an improbable chain of events, a small frontier family had shaped the destiny of a royal bloodline. Now, beneath the starlight in a quiet docking bay, that same family found the peace they never expected, along with a few inside jokes about cross-wired thrusters and a certain princess's less glamorous pit stop in the dunes. As the bay lights dimmed, Grant gently lifted AA, already drifting to sleep, and cast one last look at the restored ship, remembering how it all began. Then he stepped away, shoulders lighter, free from old burdens. No open threats, no looming conspiracies, just an ending that felt truly final, the way all great stories should conclude. He caught Era's amused glance and shared a small, knowing smile. Without a word, they left the docking bay together, heading toward a brighter tomorrow with not a single loose end remaining.